Not really.
There have been talks of people that said they've heard whispers down below. They've heard footsteps. They've heard things like knocking. You know, we've also heard what sounds like yelling and screaming coming from down below.
Obviously, it's an unusual environment, I guess, and when you kind of have that knowledge of what happened, I suppose that does slightly impact your thoughts, I guess. So.
You're not going to run into very many people throughout the day.
Well, there's more ghosts and stuff.
Exactly, you're
yeah.
absolutely right at that.
So, this is the Brocarde ghost tour. I'm going to take you to what I think is the most haunted place on this ship. Come on. There's a bad energy and I don't like it. It's pretty. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. Well, technically, you're going to call no one because there's no phone. If you want to cause a little bit of mischief, when you hear voices, you just need to come up to this window and... Works every time. B340. Now, I'm going to spend the night alone in this hotel room, so come with me and see what I encounter. Not really. This is inside of Stateroom B340. Now, it is believed that this is one of the most haunted hotel rooms in the whole world. In the whole world, not just America. So, I'm going to be in for a really interesting evening. I'm spending the night all alone in this haunted stateroom, and I'm going to take you with me and see what happens after dark. I was at the Queen Mary the other day for the VIP launch of their Dark Harbour Halloween attraction. Now, this is a little bit more special than that because this is an actual stateroom inside the ship's hull. And this is the inspiration for a lot of the Halloween event. They have a character that they've created, and he is one of the scare actors who is based on the person that it's said to haunt this room. When we were checking in, the concierge told us that the man who has been spotted by a lot of people is called Walter the Ghost. Now, I've been doing a little bit of research and there are varying different accounts as to what happened to Walter and to how he met his demise. The official record doesn't say his cause of death. However, at the Dark Harbour attraction, they have a very vivid account of the man who met his end inside this very room. So I want to try and differentiate what is fact, what is fiction, and what is fantasy and what is reality. Now, as you know, I am super sensitive to spirits, so I'm intrigued as to what I will see and what I will feel in this room. The cool thing is, when you check into this room, you get a regular standard hotel room key, nothing to see here, nothing exciting, but they also give you a very special key which is beautifully antique and reminds me of the kind of hotel room keys they used to have in the bygone era. And you can keep that as a memento of your stay when you check out of the hotel. So this is the souvenir hotel room key. This is super cute and I love the attention to detail. I think they have spent a lot of time and effort to give people a little bit of a special experience with this room. Now, regardless of whether you believe in ghosts and whether you believe in spirits, this room is decorated completely different to the other staterooms and the other rooms on this ship. So if you want the immersive, full-on Queen Mary experience, you have to check into B340. So, as you come through the door, you are greeted with this lovely welcome letter. I'm not going to spoil it and read it all, but it starts with, "To the esteemed guests of B340, it is with great regard that we welcome you to the legendary stateroom B340, known as the most haunted hotel room in the history of the world over. See, I was right. This is apparently the most haunted hotel room in the world, or so they say. B340 has a legacy that goes back decades and through the years has come to develop a life and an energy all of its own. By walking through its doors, you have now become part of this legacy. You have now joined an exclusive club of people who have had the fortune or misfortune to stay inside B340. We here at the Queen Mary have put much effort into making your stay a special one, and we hope you enjoy your time with us. Whether you're someone who believes in the supernatural or not, there is something to be said about a place that has had so many reports from so many people over such a long period of time. B340 is one of these places. We've heard stories of full-bodied apparitions, noises and whispers in the night, dancing shadows and strange happenings. These stories are powerful and have entranced passengers for years. We hope that by the time you leave here, you will leave with a story of your own to tell. So this letter does go on for a substantial few more paragraphs, but I'm not going to spoil everything because if you're planning on checking into room B340, it's important that I don't spoil the whole experience for you. Although, having said that, I get the impression that regardless or not of whether you watch my video, your encounter in this room has the potential to be something that is quite unique. When you stay in this haunted stateroom, sharing your paranormal experience is encouraged. They have this guest book which is on the table where other guests have left their paranormal encounters. I haven't opened this book yet and I haven't read any of them, but the first one is from this year. So these are all very, very recent accounts. And this one doesn't say who it's from, so I don't know about that. This one here. This one is signed Mackie and Amanda. I'm going to read you this and you can interpret it as you will. A towel in our bathroom, one that was folded on a shelf, was picked up and dropped on the other side of the bathroom. We also witness our chapstick get flicked off the bed, hitting the bed frame and scaring us half to death. Enjoy your stay, smiley face. So that first one reports of moving objects like a towel that flew off the rail in the bathroom and a chapstick that rolled off the bed. If you're a cynic, you can put that down to any number of factors. But I think, as the hotel suggests, because so many odd things have happened in this room, there must be something more to it than just coincidence. Now, some of these, the handwriting is quite bad, so I have no idea what that says. So, this one's interesting. This one is from someone called Shotzi. Hello, my name is Shotzi. I mean, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but that's how it's spelled. I don't think Walter likes to be filmed. I was recording, asking him questions through my spirit talker, but nothing really happened until I turned off the camera and I asked if he liked it better that way. Suddenly, a big bang came from the back of the room near the closet. Also, he mocked me when I read out loud the entries from this book. Words I was saying were coming up on my spirit taker. Shorty was here. Make of that as you will. I'm gonna have a little read through this and see if there's anything powerful. In fact, there's only a couple more entries. I mean, it's pretty obvious from reading all of these that people are coming here specifically with ghost hunting equipment, specifically looking to encounter ghosts and asking for them, calling on them. In fact, I'll show you in a minute, when you check into this suite, or room, whatever you want to call it, they actually leave you tarot cards, a Ouija board, a crystal ball. So they want you to get into the ghost hunting spirit, and they want to hear your stories, which is interesting because sometimes that would put people off and have them running from the door. This is the lounge area of the haunted stateroom. I believe when this ship was in function, or an active ship, although I suppose it's an active ship these days, but during the time when it was sailing or it was functioning as a moving ship, and I believe during the war, although I will fact check this, this room was actually 3 different staterooms. So all of the third class passengers would be in this area in quite small, confined cabins, and if anywhere in this room, and I'll show you inside there in a minute, if there's any area of this room that I find a little bit off, it's the closet. And I don't know if that used to be someone's sleeping quarters or someone's bed. I would imagine so by the layout. You can kind of envisage how it might have used to be in the various different sections, because it's almost blocky. But yeah, as I said, and I will go through some of the history, not just the haunted history, some of the history of this beautiful ship, because believe it or not, it is actually a stunning ship. Regardless of whether you believe in paranormal activity and you believe in ghosts, as soon as you come onto the Queen Mary, it is like stepping back in time. You've got very narrow corridors, very of another era, and you can really, if you use your imagination, you can really imagine how that ship was in its heyday. And this ship has seen so much action. It used to be a warship, and there was a lot of soldiers apparently that were stacked together on this level of the ship. I believe that many soldiers lost their lives because it was very hot, very cramped, very claustrophobic, and I guess that meant a lot of people lost their lives. And the Queen Mary has spoken. The ship's horn has just gone off, which normally would signify that it was about to set sail. But as far as I know, we're not leaving port this evening. And if we are, then that's quite exciting to go on another voyage of discovery. But no, as far as I know, we're not going anywhere this evening apart from on an epic little adventure. Fun fact, haunted flowers? These flowers have moved across the room. When I checked into the hotel, these flowers, beautifully fake flowers, so I can go like this and not cover myself in water. When I checked in, these were placed in the middle of the table, as you would so expect. And I went to the restroom, or I'm getting a little bit Americanized now. I went to the bathroom, I came back, these flowers were like that on the floor. There's no draft in here, there's no wind in here. So how did the flowers get from the table to the floor? As you can see, I'm not too spooked by that. I don't know if that's one of those happenings that we can put down to unexplained moving objects, but watch this space, because if I'm lying in bed and they fly onto the floor, I will be a lot more spooked than I am now. In fact, talking of spooky encounters, as I probably said, I think I said this, but I'm talking a lot so I can't quite recall whether I've already recapped on this. I have actually already had a paranormal encounter on board of the Queen Mary, and nothing to do with staying overnight in this room. I came here a few days ago for the VIP launch, or the launch event for the Dark Harbour event. Let's just kind of explain the differences between the two. For those of you who don't know, the Queen Mary is permanently here, and it's always a hotel. It always has paranormal tours, and you can always stay in B340, depending on availability, of course. But for Halloween, They have scare mazes within the hull of the ship. They also have a harbour that they turn into a Halloween event. So the launch for that Halloween event was a few nights ago, and I was invited along, and I wasn't really expecting to experience any kind of genuine paranormal activity, because obviously this is a Halloween event. You're on high alert, you're going to be jumpy, you're going to be looking. People are going to jump out at you, people are going to scare you. That's the purpose of it. Like, they have character actors, it's all very interactive and very immersive, and it's a fun night out for anyone who likes that kind of thing. However, I was in the middle of one of the mazes. They have this maze called Lullaby, which is, I say dedicated? I don't know if dedicated is the right word within the context of my next sentence, but this maze is themed around a young girl that supposedly drowned in the first class swimming pool. And one of the biggest ghost sightings on this ship is of this young girl who apparently drowned. And this was when obviously the ship was doing cruising and there were first class passengers. And I believe the first class swimming pool is no longer accessible to the public, although I'm going to show you the door and try my hardest to have a look inside. So stick with me on that. However, I digress. They have a haunted maze called Lullaby, which is themed around this young girl, and if you watch my Dark Harbour video, you will see a little sneak, not too much of a spoiler, but there is literally this young girl with a little dolly dancing around and jumping out at you. However, when I was inside that maze, I felt something very weird happen. Something grabbed my leg and I had a really, really intense sensation of being engulfed, and it felt like drowning, and time almost stood still. Like, it was like I was empathizing with this child, and it was like she was clambering on my leg or pulling on my leg, like quite aggressively trying to pull me underwater. Most likely, if this was a genuine apparition, she would have probably have been grasping for help to try and save herself. But that was something that I wasn't expecting on that evening. And obviously people can say, oh, it's a scare actor, but it's 2024. There are quite strict rules in terms of what these character actors can do to guests and vice versa. Like, they would never ever touch a guest, or they would always maintain quite a safe distance, because obviously they don't want to get punched, or they don't want to touch you, or they don't want to hurt you. So the things that the scare actors would do is all quite choreographed and all very controlled, and they will just appear and disappear very quickly. And to be honest, in the confines of that attraction, when it's very claustrophobic, dark corridors, it's going to make you jump. But that was quite different from the actual paranormal encounter that I had. So a little later on, I'm going to do a walk around of the ship and try and capture some filming in some of the other haunted areas, some of the public areas, and see if I sense anything else. When you're staying in this stateroom, as I was saying earlier, paranormal activity is actively encouraged. In fact, they give you the very tools that you need to contact the other side. If you don't have your own tarot deck, you will find that there is a tarot deck laid out on this very table. I'm not sure if the tarot card that has been selected is the same for every guest, but I have the Devil. Make of that what you will. I'm not sure if this represents the devilish energy that is said to be within these walls, or whether it's a mere coincidence and housekeeping are just being quite random. Maybe a little bit later on, have a little play around, do a little tarot and see what comes up. There's also a Ouija board in the wardrobe and a crystal ball. I've spoken before about my thoughts on Ouija boards. I am a little bit of a funny one when it comes to testing the dead and summoning the dead. All of my paranormal encounters have happened when I haven't been expecting them, and I always find when I try to force paranormal activity, It doesn't really go to plan. I'm very, very open to spirits coming into my world, and I've learnt to accept having that gift, but I don't like to test really, and I don't like to go down that road where I'm saying, what's your name? Can you spell it out? Because a lot of the time I can pick up on those emotions without having to ask, which not everyone can, and there is just something within me that I don't think will do a Ouija board seance or won't go down that road this evening. I don't think. I don't think it's necessary. I would rather just see what happens and see what happens naturally. And if nothing happens, then I'm okay with that, because I've already had a paranormal encounter on the Queen Mary, and as you can hear, this ship is a little bit noisy. It's hundreds and hundreds of years old. It's a ship. There are noises. Naturally, there's noises. There are cupboards, workings, engines. It's, in many ways, has the attributes of a sailing ship. So I'm expecting a lot of noises. I'm not going to immediately say that it's a ghost, but it would be nice to experience something, I think. So stick with me and we'll see what happens.
Did you get your tarot cards?
Yeah, haven't had a chance to use them, but
Okay,
maybe
fantastic.
after dark.
Yeah. Do they tell you anything about B340?
No. Well,
Okay.
The concierge said that it's haunted by a guy named Walter.
That's a good start. There's been over 50 recorded deaths on board the ship.
Oh wow.
You're going to see photo representation of those deaths.
Oh wow.
And beneath, you'll find reasons for their deaths. And some of the most infamous deaths on board the ship are listed up here as well. Obviously, she celebrated a 31-year career between the years of 1936 and 1967. She was mostly used for passenger liner service, but she did serve during World War II as well. So she transported the troops of the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Overall, she traveled 3 million nautical miles in her lifetime, and she made 1,001 peacetime crossings and an additional 72 during the war. Throughout all that, anybody of notoriety from Winston Churchill to, Desi Arnaz and Liberace and Jesse Owens, they took this ship at one time or another. But the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor were on board. This was a ship for everybody, and they made sure that everybody felt welcome while traveling on board the ship. But because she is an open liner out over the open seas, she's also going to have deaths that occur on board as well. And this comes right down to the fact that, they had illnesses, accidents, natural causes, but there were some unknown factors at play as well. We also had some mysterious deaths on board the ship. So, all in all, over 50 recorded deaths were found on board, and that has now led to some of the more infamous areas in terms of the recorded deaths on board the ship and the history tied in as well. Okay. So, I kind of want to cover some of those deaths to kind of give you an idea, tie in the historical aspect to the deaths themselves. Okay. Yeah.
I noticed I went to the launch of the Dark Harbour, and obviously there is quite a difference between what you do for the Halloween attraction and what you do in terms of proper paranormal investigations. But there are a number of characters that they've created that are supposed to be represented by actual people? Like,
yeah, so they play into like some of our stories. You know,
Yeah.
you have you have Lullaby, the Bays, which is supposed to represent Jackie, the little girl who is said to haunt our first class swimming pool. They have Samuel the Savage, which is supposed to be tied to B340.
Yeah, well, this is what was conflicting.
Okay, sure.
Because I don't normally do this, but because I was at the event, I
Yeah.
have a lot of information already about the
course.
ship. But there's so much conflicting information
Absolutely.
because, the concierge is like, oh, this is a guy named Walter. And
Right.
then the attraction is like, oh, it's Samuel the Savage who sort of butchered himself mysteriously. And
So
was-
yeah, and understand it's gonna happen. B340 has like taken on just sort of almost like a legend of its own.
Yeah.
And at times, especially when it comes to the paranormal, it is the biggest legend on board the ship. Now, did somebody get butchered in there? No. I will flat out say no. But somebody did pass away. It was at the end of a crossing. I believe it was in the 50s. Young man, probably no more than about 35, 36 years old, was found deceased in the room.
Yeah.
And shortly after his passing, things started to happen in the room. Most notably, there was a passenger. She was traveling alone. She said one night she woke up, she saw a shadow figure at the end of her bed, standing there. And she freaked out. She started screaming. A steward was nearby. He came running in. Said once he threw the lights on, the shadow figure disappeared. And then the steward told her, well, nobody ran past me in the hallways. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah.
Since then, it has become to the point where we originally had it open and people were eager to stay in there. But then they started to tell us, hey, they would check in and they would say, hey, this is great. But, our door won't stay closed or the water keeps going on and off.
Yeah.
Is there any any chance you could turn off the special effects so we can get some sleep? And that's when we have to tell them, we don't really have any special effects.
Yeah, oh dear, yeah.
So those are the kind of reports that we get from the area.
There's a journal in there. I mean,
Yeah,
this.
of
And there's
course.
a couple of incidences of things being moved and towels flying off. And something weird has already happened. Like there's a fake flower bouquet that's placed in the middle of the table.
Right.
So when we walked in, it was in the middle of the table. So we were just like settling down, like unpacking a few things, and went to the restroom, came back, the flowers were on the floor. And I was like, okay, how did that happen? Because there's no draft, there's no wind, but
Of course.
a little bit odd. And then if you kind of put that together with every odd thing, then maybe there is some kind of weird energy in there. I don't know.
Sure. And it's not necessarily that it has to have a death that occurred in there.
Yeah.
These spirits are able to move about the ship as they please,
Yeah,
and
of
if they
course.
choose a spot they want to settle in, then and like Jackie, for instance, in our first class pool, they talk about that all the time. We have no recorded child deaths on board the ship.
Yeah.
So theories have come up. One theory is she may have traveled on board during the bride and baby shuttles. And since they kept no death records at that time, then there's a possibility she may have perished during that time. But it's also the idea that it's kind of like we've created Jackie. Our belief in her is so strong collectively that we've created our own spirit in there. Now, whether she is an actual spirit of a little girl or just a manifestation of all this energy together, that's another possibility as well. But it's still a fun story to tell,
Yeah,
and the experiences that people have with her down there are, unbelievable.
But there was a lot of drownings, wasn't there? Wasn't there a collision with another ship?
That was during World War II,
Yeah, but that wasn't actually drownings on board. That was drownings from the other ship splitting in two. And again, there's conflicting reports. You're like, oh, the Queen Mary split in two. I was like, no, the Queen Mary never split in two.
Right.
It was the other ship that split in two. So yeah.
Yeah, and we get that all the time too. I've had questions of when did this ship sink and all this stuff, and I say, no, you're thinking of Titanic, and they try to tell me, well, no, I heard she got split in half. I'm like, oh, let me set the record straight for you.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to do, especially with our daytime tour known as Haunted Encounters, is that we used to have a ship's officer such as myself who went into in-depth records. He looked at all the death records and tried to really tie history into these stories so that we're not just sensationalizing things and just creating these stories, but allowing an opportunity for our guests to experience something that, a death actually occurred in this area. So maybe it is this person or that person, or maybe it's not. you know, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating nonetheless.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. She's got a great story to tell. So this is an area that I love to come to, especially on a tour such as this, because as you look down, you'll see this was the forward rope hold. So this is where, you know, also cargo. So they held the heavy cargo, things like that in here. If you look just behind you, that's the most forward portion of the Queen Mary. So that is literally the inner nose of the bow.
Wow.
Now we are right above an area where the Queen Mary had an accident during World War II. We talked about a little bit about it.
Yeah.
It's when she split an escort cruiser in half. Now the accident, it was unfortunate. They did lose about 330 members of the Curacao. Now, because we are so close to that particular accident, the residual energy seems to exist in this space. There have been talks of people that said they've heard whispers down below. They've heard footsteps. They've heard things like knocking. You know, we've also heard what sounds like yelling and screaming coming from down below. People have also reported a bit of a heaviness down here. Some have reported walking in and getting just kind of this overall feeling of dread or almost sadness.
Yeah.
It seems the atmosphere kind of thickens when you come down here.
Yeah, like for me here now, it's like an instant migraine kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
like that's a bit weird.
And it just kind of gets you. And, you know, we've done some investigations up here. We've had plenty of people come away and go, you know, it's a different atmosphere down there.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something we tie to that accident. It seems it still exists where we're at right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, such a large number of deaths as well.
Correct.
I mean, yeah, that's a lot of energy.
Yeah. And we actually, a number of years ago, this is probably over a decade ago now, though, we actually hosted the last living survivor of the Curacao, which was the ship that was cut in half. And the guide who took him on his tour asked him halfway through, and he said, "So, sir, have you ever been on the Queen Mary?" He goes, "No, but I've been under it." And
I was got goosebumps when you said that. Yeah, could you imagine?
Amazing though that he still had that. He's still able to have that sort of sense of humor, even though his life was nearly ended by the ship. You know, but yeah, this is definitely one of those areas that I always like to come to just for its overall sense of like just that feeling that you get down here.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. Oh, you can see that.
Yeah, all the way up. That looks out onto the bow itself, right up there. If you walk out onto the forward bow, you can actually see this hatch covered by the plastic, and it looks all the way down in here.
And I was reading reports during the war when it was very overcrowded in here.
Yeah.
Did soldiers used to sleep in very close proximity to each other?
There is a rumor, and it's still hard to dispel because I've heard some people say this as fact, and I've heard other people say, no, that didn't happen. But there is a rumor that there were POWs in here because they had to have a spot to put them. Now, I'm still trying to sift through all that and find out if it's true. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, the troops were spread out all over the ship. They put them in the first class pool. They drained the pool, built bunks in there. They put them in the bar. They put them in the nursery. They traveled with tanks on board. And they put 20 soldiers per tank in there to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there's so much history, and it's so like varied over the years. It's quite a fascinating.
Absolutely.
Historically, it's very fascinating, regardless of whether you believe in the paranormal side. So this is deep inside the Queen Mary. That is the front of the ship. Quite interesting history in here. Lots of conflicting reports of what happened here, but as the tour guide was saying, that this is the point of the ship in which it collided with another ship, split it into, and 300 people died. I feel like when I came in here, the energy does shift quite rapidly. For me, that's just a headache. I haven't seen any apparitions or felt anything, but obviously, it's an unusual environment, I guess, and when you kind of have that knowledge of what happened, I suppose that does slightly impact your thoughts, I guess, so quite interesting. And as we're visiting during Dark Harbour, there is a lot of background noise, so it's not a completely undisturbed tour and it's not a pure investigation, because anything you hear is likely to be Dark Harbour and likely to be another tour group, so it's still a fascinating space.
But B deck is the deck that you truly find it's good to know your way around.
Yeah.
Because twists and turns, and then you'll see how far it really goes back once we round this next corner.
So am I right to think that B deck used to be third class passengers at one point?
Well, when we come to the arrangement of classes on board the ship, everything was done by section or the smoothness of your ride.
Oh, I see.
So right now, you're actually still within first class.
Okay.
And the reason is we're in the middle, so this would be the smoothest ride we could offer. When we were just in the bow, we were in third class because up there they dealt with the roughest ride on board.
Yeah.
Just back here, we'll be going into second class, and here you had to deal with the vibrations and hum of the engines and propellers.
Okay.
That section of stairs right there has been the reported hauntings of the lady in white.
Okay.
So she's been seen all over the ship.
Okay.
Primarily the Queen Salon, the front desk by the piano, and right here.
Okay.
Now, she's another one whose death is a mystery to us. We think, again, on board during the bride and baby shuttles after World War II. At that time, if you were a bride and you were coming to the United States, your husband had to be in the United States, in New York, for you to be let off the ship.
Okay.
If they weren't there, you were sent back home.
Oh.
And we believe, for some of these ladies, maybe that was a little bit too much for them to handle. So she's been known to roam this particular section right here. She has passed people on the stairs. She's been seen coming down and going into the employee area here. But people say when they go right past her shoulder to shoulder, look back for a second, and she's already gone.
Yeah.
She doesn't interact, just up and down, back and forth. The only time she's seen to see, or has seemed to be seen interacting, is when she's in the Queen Salon, because she likes to dance in the middle of the dance floor.
Okay.
She's been also known to pop up in bridal photos.
Oh,
There's
wow.
one,
That's
there was
cool.
one of a father and daughter. They were doing the father-daughter dance, and in the picture you see this white streak right between the two of them, because it's as if she's putting herself back into that mode again.
Yeah.
So yeah. But she's been seen all over. So this is the Mauritania room. Originally, this was a main third-class lounge. So
Okay.
it was also known as the Wicker Lounge because of the style of furniture they like to use. It was also known as the Garden Lounge. We kind of stick to that motif now with the carpeting you see. But the story I will tell you came to us from the housekeeping team. I believe this was in the early 2000s. There was a day, kind of like today, very busy. A lot of events going on. This particular room was to be set up for a smaller event.
Okay.
So 3 housekeepers were assigned to the space. First 2 housekeepers walked in. They walked in through the store right here, pushed a cart to basically where you're standing here. Okay. As they walked in, they looked up, and where we had that chair positioned there, they saw a woman sitting there. Now, what they described was full ball gown, hair done up, almost looked like it was right out of the 1930s or 40s. Now they figured, well, maybe she wandered in from another room. We'll let her just kind of hang out. Because, people do that. If they find a quiet space they want to hang out in, they tend to do that on board.
Yeah.
So they started cleaning this side of the room first. Third housekeeper walks in, sees the same woman, asks her coworkers who she is. So we don't know. She was actually in here when we first walked in. So she said, well, okay. Goes over. She walks close enough to the woman and she says, ma'am, I'm sorry. We're setting up this room for an event, We can't have anybody in here at this time.
Okay.
So the woman didn't react. She just sat there, staring forward. So again, she says, ma'am, I'm sorry, you have to leave. Still no reaction. So a third time, she says, ma'am, if you're not going to leave on your own, I unfortunately have to call security to have you removed from the room. So she walks back across the room. She comes to the cart here, picks up a radio, and begins to give a description of the woman to the security desk.
Yeah.
Said halfway through talking to security, she looks over one more time. Said at that moment, the woman stood up from the chair, turned towards the three ladies, took about 3 steps forward, and then just disappeared.
Wow.
All 3 ladies reported seeing the exact same thing at the exact same time. This was actually known to be the longest lasting visible apparition we have recorded on board the ship, as all 3 ladies said she was visible for over 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So for an entity to hold that long took a lot of energy, but definitely made her presence known in here.
Wow.
It's been a while since anything like that has been reported. People tend to sort of get a feeling of kind of relief in here, almost like jubilation a little bit, considering it was a lounge that oftentimes could have hosted parties and things like that. So they don't feel threatened. Housekeepers don't tend to feel threatened in here anymore either. There are certain rooms, though, that housekeepers don't like to go into. One in particular is the Winston Churchill suite. Churchill did travel in there, but one housekeeper was going in one morning to clean up after a guest had stayed there. When she walked in, what she described was a portly gentleman sitting in a chair smoking a cigar. She said, sir, you can't smoke cigars in here. She turned around to go grab some things outside. She went back in and he was gone. Okay. What she recalled is just above that chair, there's a portrait or a painting of Churchill. She said, that's who I saw sitting in this room.
Wow.
But there's also a lot of turnover, especially with our housekeeping, simply because they go into spaces we don't even go into.
Yeah, of course.
And they have to do that by themselves.
Yeah.
Like, the quickest person that we had quit was the same day they started.
Really? Because they saw a ghost sighting?
So yeah, so she was a housekeeper. She was trained on that to clean rooms. They're like, okay, you're going to do the next one on your own. She walked in. As she walked into the room, seated at the edge of the bed, she swore up and down. She saw a woman sitting there in 1940 style attire. She turned around. She went down to HR. She handed over her badge and her keys. She said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Wow. And she left.
That's amazing. So, I was going to ask you, do you have any personal encounters or anything?
Of course. You know, you kind of got to get used to these things, though. Because if you don't, you're not going to want to come back to work.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, as I've already told you.
Yeah.
For me, the most recent one occurred after I came back to the ship. Okay. So, as you may know, in 2020, we shut down because of the COVID pandemic, and the ship was shut down for 3 years. Okay. So I was off doing other odd jobs and things like that. In December of 2022, they gauged my interest in coming back. In February of 2023, I was offered my job back. I was officially back February 20th, 2023. At that time, though, we only had a staff of about 45 people. Right now, we have a staff of nearly 600, and that's all departments.
Okay.
So now think 45 people on a ship that's over 1,000 feet long, 118 feet wide, almost 200 feet tall, and has 12 decks. You're not going to run into very many people throughout the day.
Well, there's more ghosts than staff.
Exactly. You're absolutely right at that. So we were given the opportunity to explore. I'm a tour guide. I got to get to know, get familiarize myself with the lay of the land again. So I start wandering the ship. Couple things I want to point out at that point. There was no air conditioning and no heating running. So when you talk about quiet, I mean, you could hear your heartbeat in your ears. It was so quiet. No music playing. Also, we didn't have all the lights on. But as we walk these hallways, you'll see these cylindrical lights up and down.
Yeah.
Only every third or fourth light was on.
Okay.
There were certain pockets that were just a little dark. So I'm wandering. I'm like, you know what? I haven't been to M deck in a while. Let's go wander M deck. So I get off an aft elevator. I turn the corner. I'm coming down M deck towards the middle of the ship. I'm just slowly taking it all in. Walk by one of the staterooms. Mind you, all the stateroom doors were left open. As I walk by, I hear the shower go on inside. And instantly I'm like, That's weird. I should be the only one on this deck, and there shouldn't be anybody going in and out of staterooms right now. So I mustered up the courage, and I turned, and I was like, all right, let's go investigate. Walk in. Start calling out, hello, hello. Nobody's answering. I'm like, oh. So I ran another corner. I look in, and I see the shower running through the doorway. And instantly I went, if I was trying to take a shower, would I really want anybody bothering me?
Yeah, you wouldn't leave the door open.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave them to their business. When I turned around, the shower goes off. And instantly I'm like, okay, it's time to go. I start making my way back towards the door. What really started to creep me out, though, as I look up, the door was slowly closing on itself. Now, I could have probably won the 40-yard dash that day with how fast I was running. And I ran all the way back to my office. I found my boss, and I told him what happened. He's like, well, it's a good thing you got out of there. I said, why? He said, well, we don't have the key fobs for the hotel doors. So if that door had closed on you, we wouldn't have been able to get you out of there for a little while. Now, at that time, didn't have a radio, and cell service throughout the ship can be a little spotty. Now, I will say, I didn't feel threatened by whatever was in there. The only thing I took away from it was just something saying, hey, man, welcome back.
Yeah.
And that has definitely stuck with me. Now, you get those other things where, I've been walking through the engine room on my own, and I've heard what sounds like machinery start to turn. Like I've heard squeaks and things like that. And I've stopped and I've listened, and sometimes you can hear footsteps around you. Or I have followed what sounds like a full-blown conversation going on down into the bottom parts of the engine room, only to find no source of that conversation. Now, it's whispered, but you can definitely hear it. You get a presence on the ship. The ship has a feel of its own. You can walk the decks, and you feel it, Sometimes I don't want to look down the hotel hallways because I don't know what might be at the end of them.
Because they're very compact, aren't they? There's a feeling of in some areas almost like it's closing in on you a little bit.
A little bit, and you'll get almost like when you look down the hallways, you almost get like that shining effect. Yeah. With the hallways being extra long, you know. And
it's like when we first came on the ship, before I checked in. We're walking down the corridor, and I was trying to find the restroom, and I saw the sign accessible restroom, which there was probably a closer one, but that's what I saw. Restroom, I need the restroom, I'm gonna. Sure. And as I walked down that corridor, it's getting colder and colder and colder and colder, and it just felt like forever. And I swear to you, when I opened the bathroom door, it was foggy in there. Now, I don't know if it's really foggy outside. Yeah. I don't know if there's a way that can come in, but that creeped me out because it was stone cold and foggy. And I was like, that was kind of weird.
So I want to say, you were probably on A deck, were you not? On the deck of the hotel
on the
front
deck
desk?
where the front deck.
Okay, so So the funny thing about those restrooms, and that you brought those up, they used to be switched. Okay. So the men's room is where the women's room was, and the women's room is where the men's room is. The thing is there have been reports from ladies who've gone into that ladies' restroom that for a split second, they thought they saw somebody in my uniform just like this.
Really?
Now, the reason is because there was an officer on board the ship who unfortunately poisoned himself on board. Okay. He ingested a chemical that he didn't know he was drinking. Oh my God. And it took his life after about 5 days. Yeah. But he's been known to be seen and felt on that part of the deck.
Yeah, it was the quickest bathroom visit in my life because I felt that there was someone behind me. Like the door closed, but then it almost felt like the door closed again, and I was just like, okay. And it felt foggy. It was just very odd. And for me, that is for everywhere you've taken me, that is the weirdest place.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I myself, when I go into that men's restroom there, I always kind of get that feeling like, okay, I'm not alone in here. Yeah. And I can't shake it. And until I walk out of the door, then I'm fine.
Yeah, and it's freezing cold. That's why I was like, there must be some way because it's a really foggy day and an abnormally for it perfect day to come ghost hunting. But I thought, well, is there a way that the fog is there like an open porthole or something? And I was like, well, no, but maybe I don't know. It was odd. It was odd. No doubt. And it freaked me out. And I was really walking back to that check-in desk very fast.
And we do that a lot on board too, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
We have things happen on board the ship where it's like, you know what, I'm going to get out of here. I'm not going to look anywhere else. I'm just going to go home.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had plenty of those nights where I'm power walking through the ship because,
yeah,
you know.
I bet. And you're here as well, like after. I assume you're here quite late when there's no visitors.
Yeah, I mean, the latest I think I've ever left the ship was 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And that's when it's been quiet, you know, and
that's what I'm worried about tonight, because at 3 a.m. the room didn't feel scary at all. It felt quite nice, but at 3 a.m. that's when I don't know. I might be running out. You just see this girl running across the dock. You'll be like, whoa.
We'll pay attention for it tonight.
Yeah, like someone will be like, oh, CCTV. That was this girl just running across the dock and out the door.
I'll check in with front desk tomorrow to see if you've made it through the night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm on the observation deck of the Queen Mary. It's absolutely stunning over here. It's an odd day. It's really, really foggy, but you can see the skyline of the city, like Long Beach over there. And of course, the iconic red funnels. Haven't encountered a ghost up here, but it's still very beautiful to come out here after dark and just wander around and imagine being at sea, imagine looking out to the ocean, and imagine what life was like here in a different time zone, with all those ladies in their glamorous gowns. And yeah, even when the ship was at war, like the amount of different people that have come through these walls. And yeah, it's just quite a fascinating ship to spend time on. And I'm quite fortunate that I'm spending the night here. I'm sort of quite absorbed in the history of the ship as well as the paranormal activity that might incur. And I think it's such a historic ship that's gone through so many different periods of time. It's been a cruise ship, it's been a hotel, it's closed down for a massive period of time during COVID. It's been a warship. It's a world within a ship, and naturally there's so many amazing stories because of that. One way or another, I always seem to find myself being held up inside a wardrobe. Now, there's something about wardrobes, be it a confined space, that has a very, very strange energy. And that's not a ghost. That is part of the Dark Harbour attraction. I'm assuming, unless someone's getting brutally slaughtered, but yeah. So, as I was saying earlier, my investigation this evening isn't without interruption. This is probably the most unsensible yet obvious time to visit the ship. Like on the run up to Halloween, obviously this becomes more of a haunted attraction than ever before. And the scare mazes and the influx of visitors means that every noise that you hear is likely to be an attraction or something designed to scare people. But as I was saying earlier, when you stay here, they really encourage paranormal activity. In fact, as you can see, there is a Ouija board. Oh God, and it's actually quite a heavy crystal ball, to be honest. They're not messing around, so there is a little bit of some questionable artwork here. Now, this guy here, don't know about the origin of this, but I'd say that's sort of a bedsheet come straitjacket ensemble, which probably wouldn't be out of place in New York Fashion Week, but I'm guessing there's some sort of disturbing meaning behind that I'm completely unaware of. And also here, some very, very strange. A child with a mask holding a doll. And a lady in a very, very odd position. I don't know, I guess it all adds to the ambience. So I was questioning earlier the decor in this room because this room has been out of bounds for passengers for a number of years. Rumour has it that this room was closed to the public because people were too terrified to stay in it, and it became a bit of a health and safety human resources hazard. I'm not sure about that, but the truth is that it has been renovated, and I questioned this earlier with my tour guide, and the reason behind this renovation isn't to take it back to its authentic state. I think they are just trying to add to the ambience of this being a haunted location, which I was just hoping that it would be decorated to replicate how it would have been in its heyday, but I guess that's the problem. When you book into a room that's the haunted room, obviously places want you to have an experience that measures that kind of... That sounds like a dog barking. I completely digress from my original point, but I think it's also quite interesting how people like to tie paranormal activity to one room. And this always happens, like someone died here, it must be the haunted room. And apparently someone did die here, not in the... Well, actually, no one knows the circumstances of this death, but there was a recorded historical death in this room. And I still think this used to be several rooms, so it could be here, it could be there, but within this area, there was a death, which leads people to believe that it was haunted. More interestingly, when I was on my spooky tour and paranormal tour, things started to make sense. For me, an interesting point in Stateroom B340 is its proximity to the bow of the ship. We're here on level B, and we're pretty much at the end of the corridor. This is almost at the tip of the ship, like the tip of the bow is really, really close in proximity to this room. And obviously when these ships were sailing, the class system worked in a way that, and this was explained earlier on the tour, the class system is in relevance to the motion of the boat. So if you wanted the smoothest ride and the nicest experience, in those days you would get a cabin in the middle of the ship because this would be the least choppy, the least likely to make you ill. So that was seen as the luxurious quarters in the middle of the ship. And the flip side of that is the third class passengers would always be near the bow of the ship because there was more motion, it was more unpleasant, and it was more, your crossing would be a lot more choppy, which is an interesting fact. But also, the more interesting fact about this ship is the bow of the ship is very, very near where the ship collided with another ship during World War II. This accident saw 300 people die. So what I find interesting is that B340 is very, very close in proximity to where an accident happened in World War II. It is said, and this is historical, this isn't fiction, this is reality. The ship, the Queen Mary, was making a voyage and it collided with a smaller vessel. And this split the vessel in half. If you Google this, there will be reports of the Queen Mary splitting in two. No, that never happened. This was not the Titanic. The Queen Mary had damage to its bow area and damage to its hull, but it didn't actually have any impact. It was actually the ship that the Queen Mary hit that saw the deaths of 300 men, because this ship is so huge and so colossal, it literally just sliced another vessel in two, and that is very close in proximity to room B340. So that could be why people are sensing a lot of paranormal activity. I've always said that, to me, ghosts do not stay in one place. They are spirits, they are able to move, they're able to move within an area, they're able to move within a vessel. So to say that one room is haunted and the rest of the ship isn't, and sometimes I will come into haunted environments like this and I will sense all kinds of mad stuff, and it won't necessarily be the ghost of Walter that allegedly lives in the stateroom that I'm staying in. And I think that's the beautiful thing. I think it's better to not feel the pressure to be influenced by these stories or these reports. And before, when I used to visit a haunted location, I used to say, don't ever share any information about that location. I want my mindset to be pure, but at the moment, I've developed a skill set which differentiates from what's fact and fiction. And I don't mind knowing that allegedly there's a ghost called Walter living in this room, because there's no pressure within me to communicate with Walter. I will take that knowledge, bank that knowledge, but I will still roam around the ship and I will go to different areas and I will have the ability to just be honest about what I feel is haunted and what I feel is not. And everyone's experience is different, and that's what makes paranormal investigations so fascinating. So I feel on that note, I need to step out of the closet and explore a little more of the ship. So this is the Brocarde ghost tour. I'm going to take you to what I think is the most haunted place on this ship. Come on. So, for me, right about here is where the energy gets really, really whack. Like, if I'm correct with my assumption or with my knowledge, this is actually the second class area, and this is A deck, but very weird energy here. Completely mad vibes. Now, when I opened up this door earlier and I was literally just trying to find a restroom, it was very foggy, very hazy, and As I was saying to the tour guide, this is the quickest bathroom visit I've ever had in my life. I felt the door close twice behind me, and it's just super eerie. We are now at the polar opposite end of the ship, and there's no one in the restroom, so we could go in and we could film that, but it hasn't happened this time. But when I opened this door earlier, it was hazy, it was foggy, it was really, really weird. Like, there's obviously some kind of machinery and running sounds around here, but there's a bad energy and I don't like it. It's pretty. This whole area here, there's just so many doors. What is lurking behind all of these doors? Like, it's just very, very bizarre energy here. It's almost like the air is thinning and it's making it harder to breathe. It's very disorientating. It's very, very strange, and I don't know why. Do you think that the Queen Mary is haunted? Even though some of the deaths are unregistered and no one knows the cause of death, there is still a very large number of actual deaths that have been documented. 300 people. So at one point, there were probably more ghosts aboard this ship than staff or passengers. And who are we to argue with that? I feel like there's a magic within these walls that takes you back to another era. So who could blame a ghost for hanging around? Another fun fact. Is the Queen Mary haunted by the ghost of Winston Churchill? It seems a little unlikely, but who am I to judge someone's paranormal experience? I mean, a chambermaid said that she saw Winston Churchill smoking a cigar in the Winston Churchill suite. It's possible, who knows? If you're having a little wander around the Queen Mary, you'll notice that there are a lot of historical elevators which are no longer working, which is very beautiful, but rather frustrating if you're trying to transition between floors. This is absolutely stunning. Ghosts aside, this is now the stern of the ship, and such a beautiful view of Long Beach, and I'm here for it. Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Well, technically, you're gonna call no one because there's no phone, but welcome to my kooky sense of humor. It's dark, like Dark Harbour. This is the part of the ship that they call the sports deck. But more importantly than that, it's actually a beautiful spot to look at the magnitude of these huge red funnels. That's what makes the Queen Mary so recognisable, and there's 3 of them, and they're quite impacting. This is absolutely stunning. Imagine being the captain of the ship in its heyday. You will be there commanding this massive vessel through the water. I just find that's mind-blowing and beautiful anyway. But it's also said that this is haunted. I agree that as soon as you open the sliding doors and walk inside here, it's a little bit different to the rest of the ship. I have not seen a ghost yet, but I could imagine that it's potentially, again, quite an active area. Again, we are pretty much at the bow of the ship, and every report that I've kind of heard and experienced this evening is steering towards a lot of activity going on in this area of the ship. If I'm not mistaken, B340 is not a million miles from here on a different deck. I feel it's situated over here and down a couple of levels. But again, it would coincide with that disaster that happened when the Queen Mary collided and caused a lot of deaths via drowning. I touched upon earlier how I had an encounter when I was in one of the haunted mazes that made me feel like I was drowning. And the tour guide said that so many people had reportedly seen the ghost child that supposedly drowned in the first class swimming pool. Now, what I'm a little bit confused about, even though the ship doesn't have an historical record of someone drowning in the first class swimming pool, this ghost has a name and a whole backstory. So I don't know whether it's one of those sort of situations where things spiral and take on a life of their own and the legend overweighs the reality. But I definitely sense something very, very peculiar when I was in one of the mazes, and I felt like someone was grabbing at my leg, and I felt that weird drowning sensation. And yeah, it's quite interesting. I feel the problem is with a lot of ghost stories that, of course, you can't say a ghost story is historical fact. And if they have no official, legitimate record of death and cause of death, then I feel like attractions like the Queen Mary are going to be reluctant to confirm those stories, because if they can't trace it back to an historical event that's in their records or in their books, then I guess they're skirting on quite dangerous territory. But for whatever reason, a lot of people have sensed similar things in those areas. So again, more food for thought. I've just stumbled across the first class swimming pool. For those of you who have been paying close attention to the rest of this video, this is said to be one of the most haunted areas of the ship. And as my instinct predicted, this actually is closed to the public because it is a scare maze at the moment, which completely aligns with the encounter that I shared with you the other day. And this photo here depicts what the first class swimming pool would have looked like circa 1936, pre-maiden voyage. Note, diving boards, which were removed from the pool due to movement of the ship. mischievous nature, like myself, this is a little bit of a heads up. When staying in this haunted stateroom, what will happen is groups of people will come to find the haunted stateroom, and out of nowhere you'll hear voices right outside this window. So if you want to cause a little bit of mischief, when you hear voices, you just need to come up to this window and works every time. And the people on the other side will get a scare, courtesy of yourself. Now, I'm wondering how this is going to pan out, because at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m, if I hear people giggling outside that window, then I'm not going to know if it's a ghost or a group of ghost hunters. So currently there is a ghost running up and down the corridor, because you can hear crazy footsteps. I'm feeling that's unlikely to be the case, but as I mentioned earlier, this ship is alive with a variety of different sounds, and probably not all spirit related. So I was going to share a few fun facts about the Queen Mary, because actually this ship has very British roots. It sailed its maiden voyage from Southampton in 1937. So in its heyday on that maiden voyage, it would have been packed full of excited passengers. Perhaps that would have been their first journey, perhaps that would have been their first time out of the country. And in those days, travel was different. Travel was an absolute luxury. And these people would have been seeing some of the world for the very first time. So there would have been an exciting energy on board that ship. It's quite interesting to compare it with the days of travel now, where everyone's going here, there and everywhere, and travel is so accessible to most people. I also feel that it's quite fascinating that an English psychic called Lady Mabel also predicted that the Queen Mary will have its most success after it's stopped sailing. And I suppose that's fascinating, because in some ways that is very true. It is a tourist attraction now, it is a place of history, it has peaked, I suppose, and it's on the map in a very different way, and it's here in Long Beach now, and it's not sailing anymore. That insight is probably quite a strange thing to say at the time, because people are thinking this ship is going to have a lifetime of sailing ahead of it, and to say that it would peak after it stopped sailing was quite an interesting insight from a psychic. The Dark Harbour event pays homage to Lady Mabel, and there is a fortune teller, psychic, as part of one of the attractions, who gives you clues to get into secret speakeasies. On that note, I thought it would be quite a fun thing to do to perhaps read a little tarot. I'm going to keep it really, really simple. I mean, I think there's so many, and I'm terrible at shuffling, so please forgive my butterfingers and clumsy fingers. The devil is always the wrong way up. Well, okay, as I said, when I checked into this room, the devil card was drawn, like the devil was on the table. I don't know if that's a coincidence, I don't know if housekeeping pull one card randomly, or I don't know if it's intentional to put the devil on the table because this room is a little bit loaded with energy. And let me know if you stayed in room B340, and I always stumble when I say that, let me know what card was on the deck. I'm going to keep this really simple, and I'm going to pull one card from the deck. I could do a simple yes/no answer. There's several systems to tarot. You can ask the deck a question, and as long as the question has a yes/no answer, whatever card you pick is the answer to that question. So excuse my dear little shuffling. And I feel like there's so many questions I could ask this deck right now. I have a lot whizzing through my head. And an interesting one would be, am I on the right spiritual path? So this card is the World. Now before I explain what all these cards mean, I'm gonna ask one more question, and I might give them another little shuffle just for ease. And one that is a cheeky question in some ways, but I want to know if I'm going to be ridiculously successful in my field. So I'm going to ask if I'm going to have a lucrative and successful future. And I know that's a terrible question, and you probably shouldn't be using tarot in this way, but I thought it would be interesting. So we have the Hierophant. So I've just drawn this card as an answer to my question. Interestingly, the World means triumph, a happy ending, and fate, which is quite reassuring considering the question that I answered is, am I on the right spiritual path? And if you kind of analyze my life over the last year or so, then I have been on a massive mega journey that's taken me way out of my comfort zone. It's opened up a world that I didn't really know existed. So the fact that the world is now my oyster is quite an amazing card to draw, and very, very fitting, like the most fitting card you could probably draw as an answer to the question that I asked. Moving on, the second card I drew was the Hierophant, and my question was, in short, I asked it in quite a rambling way. I wanted to know if I was going to be successful and lucrative, and the Hierophant came up, and this was my interpretation of this is that this card is about guidance and seeking advice and looking above for someone to guide you on the right path, which is quite an interesting card. It's a little bit non-conclusive, I would feel, but I guess there is going to be something or someone or an array of different people guiding me, and it's quite a traditional card. Maybe it's saying I need to, focus on my roots and who I am, and yeah, it's quite interesting. So that's my little reading. I'm not going to go into too much more of the depths of tarot. This isn't my deck, and I think when you're reading tarot, to have a spiritual attachment to your tarot deck is quite an important thing. This is just a deck that any person that stays in this room gets to use, I would assume. It's not my deck. I'm not hugely into tarot. I find it fascinating, but when you're reading for yourself as well, I find that's a little bit of a strange situation. I know tons of people do it. I know people who do daily tarot readings where they begin their day by selecting a card, and that card dictates how their day plays out, which I think if you're into that, that's a beautiful thing. I feel like that knowledge changes the course of your day subconsciously. So there you go. That's just a little detour into the world of tarot. Good morning. It's very, very early the next day, and I've had an absolutely terrible, terrible night's sleep. I slept with the light on all night. I was awoken several times, and this morning I just feel drained of all energy and all life. Like I have definitely woken up a different person. So there is some kind of weird energy that's draining my joy at the moment. Could that be an early morning thing? Could that be lack of sleep? Perhaps. But this ship, I feel that if you want to come and stay in B340, that's fine. I think the beauty of this ship lays outside of this themed room, and I personally would have preferred the room to be left in its original state, perhaps not with so many ghost hunter equipment and tarot cards and crystal balls, because these things are personal to the psychic. Like normally your own tarot deck will be charged with your energy. It's quite hard to get an accurate reading from tools that multiple people are using, and I understand why they do it, but I feel like this ship is haunted. I feel like there's some awful energy in certain areas. And when I say awful, I just mean the kind of energy that terrifies you and then drains you of all your power. And there are a couple of spots on this ship, which I touched upon yesterday, that has that energy. I haven't personally felt it in B340. I've seen a few things like shadows in the night in my kind of transient sleep deprived state. Like I kept seeing a man in almost like a morning suit with a top hat standing in the corner, and I kept sitting bolt upright. Now, whether that was just, it's difficult when you're tired, and it wasn't a vivid enough, impacting enough encounter for me to say that was definitely a ghost. Whereas in the past, I've had encounters where I'm definitely like, that was something mad. That cannot be anything else. So subtle things. And I think that is the gist of B340. Like there's a lot of noises. Like I woke up with a lot of noises, and there was voices in the corridor at 3 a.m, 4 a.m. I put it down to guests. It's a hotel. You have guests walking down the corridor, but I heard someone outside pacing up and down the room, outside the room, talking on a phone, and I went out and there's no one there. So I would say in 2024, they were talking on the phone because there was no second voice, but perhaps if that was a spirit, they were talking to another spirit. I don't know. It's make of that what you will. I'm not saying any more on that topic. What I am saying is the two really impacting encounters that I've had were in the accessible women's bathroom, which I do not want to go back in that area, and also within the lullaby maze. If you've stayed in Stateroom B340, then share your experience. I want to know. I want to know what happened to you. Did you encounter something? Did you encounter nothing? Like I said when I checked in, there is a guest book. The stories are a little bit non-conclusive in there. No one's saying I got savaged and ravaged by a ghost. These things do happen. It's all a little bit like things were moving, things moved, like blah, 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 things got moved around the room, things fell off, which does suggest there's some kind of weird energy going on. But if you stayed here, share your experience, or let me know if you've encountered anything else on the Queen Mary, because I feel like this ship is more than just this room. So come and see for yourself, like come and see it in its glory. I think it's nice to hear the stories. I think it's nice to do like a ghost tour here. I feel like the most authentic experience you can have is to just come, stay overnight, walk the corridors late at night, go to those areas, feel the energy, trust your own instincts, see where you feel that there's spiritual activity, see if you sense anything. Try and clear your mind of all the stories that you've read, all the stories that you've heard, all of the stories that your tour guide's telling you. Try and have an authentic experience based on what you're sensing and what you're feeling. And yeah, please feel free to share it with me. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, send your comments. It takes so much effort and so much energy to make these videos. So your appreciation and your kindness and sharing your encounters means quite a lot. Thanks for watching. This is going to be a long video. I can already tell. Haven't even hit the editing deck, but I know that I filmed quite extensively. Before I go, I'm going to leave an entry in the journal book in the room. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to say because there could be a couple of spoilers in there of things that happened that I haven't revealed, but I'm going to leave a diary entry. So if you check into this room after me, then you'll get to read my story and my encounter of the room. Bye.